This is as far as my time goes, so I will be talking about Windisch. I'll be talking about the research on sound and music.
Si dovrebbe alzare un po' il volume, non sentiamo. Allora può parlare più vicino. Close to the microphone.
Okay, thank you. Is that better? Great. So I'll be talking about research on sound and music. For a long time, the musical accompaniment of films during the silent era has been regarded as a homogeneous practice, represented by the most populated teens and 20s works of a few famous composers and directors. And the first 20 years of silent film accompaniment have been fairly overlooked and neglected in the public opinion and as well as in research up until the 1980s when an explosion of research took place. Clearly, the film music highlights of the silent era are easier to locate and analyze than the ordinary day-to-day practice. There are, however, certain sources that enable us to look into everyday life of film music production and reception. The contemporary trade press provides excellent material for the research on the relationships between the parties involved in film music production and exhibition, as well as on the reception of music. In this lecture, we'll examine different materials relevant to research in silent film music, which can be found in one of the first American trade magazines, namely the Moving Picture World, which was founded by J.P. Palmas in 1907 and published until 1935. In 1909, the editors of the magazine, Moving Picture World, established a weekly column that was dedicated to the propagation and improvement of film music, like Music for the Picture. These are two logos for the column, one from 1913, the other one from 1960. And apart from this column, various other articles articles concerned with musical issues were published on an irregular basis, often authored by such influential personalities as Samuel L. Rottapfel or Hugo Riesenfeld. And the first part of this essay will demonstrate 6 different categories with respective examples to illustrate the variety of exploitable material in regard to musical source studies. In the second part, I will highlight one aspect of musical practice for which this trade magazine proved to be an excellent example. In the presentation of silent films or music as anesthesia, Julian Anderson provides a profound yet compact introduction to silent era practices, also drawing on contemporary accounts like this. And another fascinating contribution about that era and its musical developments is furnished by Tim Anderson in his excellent essay, Reforming Jazz Music, the Problematic Aesthetics of Early American Film Music Accompaniment. And Tim Anderson's article is primarily concerned with the musical aesthetics of the Nickelodeon and its evolution from a potentially spectacular music hall practice to a more formalized model of film exhibition that respects the principle of on-screen depictions as the master narrative. Tim Anderson also argues that the reform of aesthetic norms of film style and exhibition would eventually attract the middle class as a new mass audience, which is a theory that I have followed closely in our master thesis. I have to mention at this point that my research is focused on American silent film due to the geographic origin of the publication Moving Picture World, to which the trade press and movie industry insiders rather affectionately referred to as the world, which I will adopt for this lecture. And although silent film sound practices around the world share many similarities, it would be non-scientific to neglect those differences from one country to another. Let me now get to the categories of sources in the world. So after the examination of more than 500 editions of this magazine, published between 1909 and 1920, I conclude 6 categories relevant to silent film music research. The first category are editorial articles, which constitute the main content of the column Music for the Picture. And the very first address of the chief editor in 1909 has been cited various times by scholars as a turning point in film music history and when music started to receive more attention and serious treatment in the film production process. And aside from pages especially dedicated to film music, occasional articles on the musical accompaniment or film music reviews would appear in other sections of the magazine in reference to a specific event. The second category would be letters to the editor. These letters have been established virtually from the beginning, from the introduction of the music department of the column, and they have served in great part as a sort of forum for people directly or indirectly involved in the musical end of moving picture production and presentation. Most of the letters were submitted by musicians or musical directors, ranging from some pianist in a small town to the well-known Univeristat, the director of the Rialto in New York. And other contributors included movie theatre managers, instrument manufacturers, and the film-going public, although letters from outside the industry were rather the exception. One fact that I'd like to mention is the jovial and amicable undertone of these letters. In many discussions, it had a latent sense of collegiality, as well as affirmation on the fact that the new medium film was of great relevance and destined for a long future. In 1917, the editors introduced a Q&A section as part of the music column as well. The third category would be musical suggestions. These musical suggestions or musical programs are part of the music department services from the beginning and are to be considered a model preceding the later introduced cue sheets. At first, these proposals for musical accompaniment were only authored by the editors of the column, but after some time, the editors also printed suggestions from musicians and musical directors, and that thus established an exchange of ideas on what to play for films as a major part of the column as well. These suggestions included vague descriptive information in terms of atmospheric music, as well as specific numbers, including the title and publishing company. I have one example of one of those musical suggestions from the 1913 film The Wartime Siren. And as you can see in the example, the music cues are linked to the narrative film action. And the suggested selection is a mixture of incidental music with like a march and a hurry, popular tunes and patriotic folk songs, a Yankee Doodle and a Dixie, and classical music like overture. We can conclude from this and other musical suggestions that during the silent era of film, or the early days of silent era, the accompaniment exhibited a compound form of musical genres, and the industry did not distinguish that harshly between popular tunes, folk songs, and classical music in terms of appropriateness, over which a heated debate has been started a few years later in terms of what to play for music. And the diverse form of musical suggestions logically developed into a more general model, namely into cue sheets, which form the next category of sources. The cue sheets, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with, it's not verified who initially coined the term or established this form of musical suggestion, but many believe that Max Winkler from the California Music Publishing Company in New York first came up with this device for musical accompaniment, as he claims himself in his autobiography, A Penny from Heaven. And although cue sheets exhibited a relatively homogeneous form of notation for silent film accompaniment compared to their forerunner models, there was still a form of variety in these as well. The editors of the world undertook a remarkable expansion of the cue sheet pages in 1918, abiding by their tradition of supplying musical suggestions to their readers. It's one example of a musical suggestion from 1926. And the fifth category would be adverts and announcements. And according to the nature of a trade magazine, obviously, the world contained various commercials and adverts. On the basis of advertisements for instruments, for example, we can reconstruct the technical developments of these machines over time and document the implementations of new inventions. For example, the electro-pneumatic action for organs, which made it possible for the console to be located almost anywhere in the theatre, or the patented double hole tracking system to play the pianos. Apart from ads for instruments and all kinds of all kinds, the trade press contained job listings for musicians, ads for song slides, and film music anthologies, latest patents, as well as union news. And I conclude these materials in this category as other forms of adverts and announcements. Here we've got examples for advertisements for instruments or for music anthology authored by Clarence E. Sin, which is one of the main editors of the College Music for the Picture. The sixth category would be anecdotes. And I'm sure we can all agree that anecdotes form a valuable device of historical sciences to portraying a certain area or industry in a more hyperbolical and intimate way than factual sources. And these short stories that sometimes develop into inside jokes and they tap into cliched opinions. Another quality of anecdotes is their insight into people's everyday lives, as well as into the day-to-day practice of silent film exhibition in this particular case. And like any other trade magazine, the World was a grateful source for stories and anecdotal evidence from inside the industry. I would like to mention two incidents that made their way into academic works on silent film music. Kurt London's 1936 summary of film music's aesthetics and characteristics contains the following story. A man in a cinema audience had been sitting in long-suffering silence while a very bad pianist accompanied the film. When the heroine was about to seek an end of her troubles by plunging into a watery grave, he called out to her image on the screen in a voice full of disgust, "Take the pianist with you while you're about it." And another often cited anecdote comes from T.W. Griffith, who, fed up with arguments about musical detail, famously said, "If you don't kill anyone, you won't be an actor but a musician." I would now like to go to an example that I introduced a practice that I was able to trace via accounts of these sources that I mentioned before. The practice of sing-along in American movie theaters appeared in the mid-1880s and was firmly established in the Nickelodeon programs of the 20th century. Commonly known as illustrated songs, this practice combined music and still images that were projected onto the screen via stereopticons or bivalent magic lantern projectors which could project both slides and film. The images would illustrate the lyrics of the song, hence the term illustrated song, and the slides were hand-colored, and by the mid-teens, one song consisted of about 12 to 16 slides. The topics were generally nostalgic, sentimental and patriotic, and very often popular songs found their way into slide projection. John Collier argues in 1908, in addition to the moving picture, the Nickelodeon as a rule has singing, and almost invariably the audience joins in the chorus with a good will. So the last slide was mostly the chorus slide, which contained the lyrics of the chorus and the contact information of the slide producer. I'll give you an example of that. And in the historical context of the Nickelodeon boom, the song slide practice can be regarded as a part of the battle against foreign films, mainly from the French company Pathé, who took advantage of the film industry's expansion in 1905 and established themselves firmly in the American market in the following years. The original American illustrated song posed a counterpoint in form and content to Pathé Productions, and bore the intention of the Americanization of the cinema as a defense strategy against towards the dominance of the French movie industry. In 1909 and 10, the popularity of these illustrated songs faded slightly, which is also expressed in the trade press, until the practice vanished rather suddenly, with some exceptions, in 1913. During the First World War, the practice of sing-alongs was turned into a more specific social experience with an emphasis on patriotism and uniting the public against the foreign enemy. Articles and letters in the trade press show that it was very common in picture presentations to have the pianist or the orchestra play patriotic songs prior to the film projection or as part of the program. And the famous film exhibitor Samuel L. Rothapfel made it a tradition for the opening of most of his famous picture palaces to have the Star-Spangled Banner, which developed into the American national anthem, played by his orchestras, and according to the trade press, this has been met with great enthusiasm. Interestingly, nowadays in some parts of the world, for example in Thailand, the royal or the national anthem is still being played before every movie performance, and the audience is expected to stand up as a sign of respect. I would like to go even further in the description of the song slides as a national institution and point out their influence during and after the First World War as a connecting social experience that spread a sense of nationality and is inherent in mainstream American cinema up to date. I will make a distinction between the functions of song slide projection on account of their differing intended aim, one being the sole entertainment and the promotion of sheet music, the economic function. There we go. And the other aiming at unifying the audience against the common enemy and bonding them to the performance on another level, which I call the sociological functions. And based on the term that the world editor, George Bainon, which was one editor of the music department, coined in a 1916 article, I'm referring to this specific practice as community singing. In one article, Bainon complains about the inability of the majority of the audience to memorize the lyrics of the national anthem or other hymns. He proposes an experiment, and he suggests that the theatre managers should organize song slides with the lyrics of the national anthem and other folk songs and traditional airs. The procedure was as follows. The narrator would explain the history and origin of the song, and then the lyrics would be projected onto the screen. Some exhibitors even handed out sheet music, which proved to be disadvantageous in case a conductor was setting the pace. Bainon was also advising against solo actions during that performance. He was certain of the positive resonance and the pedagogic benefit of said project. By that time, film has proven to be a useful medium to introduce classical music to a broader audience throughout the country. And with this device, Bainon planned to propagate traditional patriotic music to the public. Additionally, by actually singing along with the musicians and vocalists, the audience would experience an even more intimate and therefore more personal movie-going experience, and could be bonded to the film presentation on yet another level, thus fulfilling the sociological function. This experiment presupposes the active participation of the audience during the performance, as opposed to the passive or concert-like presentation of the illustrated songs apart from the chorus and everything. And according to Bainon, the feedback was indeed overwhelming. The reasons for this stunning resonance are not hard to comprehend, I believe, because with the war entry of the United States in 1917, the population's vigilance towards certain foreign cultural influences was heightened on every level. And this led to strong recommendations on, if not prohibitions, on what or rather what not to play as musical accompaniment for silent pictures. Looking at historical developments at that time, there's one other factor to be considered as far as narrative film contents are concerned. Up until then, the American Civil War, 1861 until 1865, was featured regularly and had brought up tensions in American public. This also applied to the musical end of picture exhibition. For example, one musician from the North who had just started his job in a movie theatre in the South was almost lynched for playing a traditional Northern folk song at one of his first shows. So the immersion of new common enemy played a crucial part in the reuniting of the American population. In an 1918 edition of the World, we find an advertisement for the patriotic song "We'll Be Going Home," including a short description of the song's origin. The song is available on slides, and if purchased in combination with the sheet music, is free of charge for theatres that introduce the community singing. What I intended with this lecture was to uncover possible material from the trade press to provide an aid to researchers to reconstruct part of this fascinating area. And I would like to conclude my lecture with one quote from Ben and Hall's book, The Less Remaining Seats. And he reported the community singing in one of New York's beauty palaces in the late 20s. Then would come the community singing. On the screen, the lyrics of Mine to Heaven would be projected, and the spotlight on the console would run to a deep cobalt. In response to the organist's toothpick dueling, the balcony customers would be made to compete against the orchestra patrons with all the spirit of feeling versus Harvard. Then the ladies would be invited to sing a chorus while the men come. At this point, the organist would usually stop playing and suddenly end. Sure enough, the ladies would be singing and the men somewhat sheepishly coming. Finally, all girls over 29 would be asked to stand up and sing a solo as the house lights flapped out. The organ opened up Sforzando and everybody knew the time not laughing. Then it would be over. Thank you very much.